Good morning, members. It's the appointed time. We have a quorum. I call to order the meeting of the Bills Committee. I would like to first welcome members and representatives from the administration to this meeting of the Bills Committee. We have the representatives from the administration list set out in the agenda. Members can refer to some background materials, including the electrical brief issued by the FSTB, as well as the Legal Service Division report. I first would like to ask members if we should invite written submissions from the public, as well as deputations to hear their views. If members consider there is no need for that, we will not invite written submissions. We actually received a written submission from Rita, and we have forwarded it to the administration for consideration. Let's now discuss the policy matters of the bill. I'm hoping if there is not much to discuss, we will end our discussion on policy matters at 12, and then we'll leave 30 to 40 minutes for clause-by-clause examination, because we have to look at every word in the clauses, even punctuation. Hopefully we can end everything by 12:45. Now we should commence discussion on policy matters. We have 8 members who have pressed the request to speak button. We have in total 11 members in the Bills Committee. I will now hand over to the Permanent Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury, Mr. Andrew Lai, to brief members on the legislative proposals. Thank you, Chair. We have this bill because we have to implement the measures in relation to the increase of the stamp duty rate for residential property transactions from the current 4.25% to 6.5%. Let me now explain to members what we want to achieve with this bill in terms of policy as well as implementation. Going back to the background of the stamp duty system, we have a progressive stamp duty system. For those worth under $4 million, we will only charge $100. For those above $21 million, the highest tier, we're charging 4.25%. As members know, we're in a tight fiscal position in the past few years. The administration has adopted a multi-pronged approach to deal with this. We are cutting government expenditure, and we try to increase government revenue where we can. For stamp duty related to luxurious properties, in this financial year, for the first 10 months, we have 65,000 residential property transactions, and less than 200 of them are over $100 million in property value. So we want to adopt the principle of affordable users pay principle. With this, every year we'll have an additional revenue of $1 billion. With the proposals, there are 3 areas in implementation. First, for the commencement date, we will commence the proposals from 26th of February this year. That is the day after the budget has been announced. For residential property transactions done after 26th of February, they will still be charged with the existing stamp duty rates. After passage of the legislative proposals, the Inland Revenue Department will charge the difference in stamp duty to owners. We also have marginal relief arrangements. We have a threshold of $100 million. So for property worth $100 million or below, they will be charged 4.25%. And even if just $100,000 past the $100 million threshold, it will be 6.5%. That is a drastic difference, which is why we have a three-tier system, so that progressively we have rates increasing from 4.25% to 6.5%. It works just like what we have for property of value less than $4 million and above $4 million. We will not charge 1.5% right away for those that have a value immediately above $4 million. We have a progressive system. As the Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury introduced in the previous council meeting of the bill, we will charge a total. That is, we want to prevent piecemeal transactions to circumvent the relevant requirement. As you may understand, let me give you an example. We have a new territories village house that is 3 stories high, and we have an owner A selling the house in 3 contracts with 1 floor per contract to the same seller. The Inland Revenue Department will have reasonable doubt that this is a piecemeal transaction. So for the total stamp duty, if it is $22 million, you would have to pay 4.25%. But if it is divided into 3 transactions, it would just be 1.5 to 2% in stamp duty. We want to protect public revenue to make sure people won't be circumventing the relevant requirements, causing losses on the government. We have reader suggesting that this may impose an additional cost for redeveloped residential property. We do understand their concern. For acquisition of older property, the developer will acquire the properties at different times. So we will just include in the calculation of stamp duty a series of properties. For each property, we have it costing $4 million, and there are 30 units. Before, we would charge stamp duty with a rate of 4.25%. For a property with a value above $100 million, we will charge a rate of 6.5%. It can really impose a great burden on developers who are trying to redevelop certain properties. And we will actually work with the Inland Revenue Department to see how we're going to deal with this. I will pledge here that we will follow up on this issue, but we may not be able to handle this issue with legislative proposals in the bill. We now welcome questions from members. Thank you for the presentation. I read out the order in which members are going to speak. Mr. Hong Kam-in, Dr. Johnny Mr. Alan Chen, Mr. Augustine Wong, Mr. Andrew Fan, Ms. Nixie Lam, Ms. Christine Fong, and Mr. Wu Yingpeng. I'll assign a 4-minute time limit. If necessary, we can have a second round of questions and comments. Mr. Hong Kam-in. Thank you, Chair. I understand where the administration is coming from. They want to adopt the principle affordable users pay, and it will create an additional revenue for the government of $1 billion. But I am also concerned that with this stamp duty system, we will have a decrease in the number of transactions, so you will not have as much in additional government revenue. As you said earlier, it can also impact redevelopment. You said you're going to conduct assessments in future, but with your assessments in future, if you find there is something contradictory, how can you make sure there is no impact on redevelopment of buildings and the provision of smaller units with such redevelopment projects? I think you really need to attach importance to the addressing of this issue. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hong. About the impact on redeveloped properties, we do understand there is such impact, which is why I pledge that we will work with the Development Bureau and RETA to see how we're going to deal with this, the best approach to deal with this. But if we look at the proposal specifically, the change in the tax rate is just 2.25%. As you may remember, when we had a really vibrant property market, the administration introduced some very stringent measures, and unless you are someone who has never purchased residential property, including the companies who are purchasing redeveloped properties, they would have to pay a 30% stamp duty. We believe the impact with our proposals here will not be as significant, and we of course pledge that we will follow up on this issue. I ask them to really address this issue. We have a different market situation now. We have a relatively bad property market. I hope they can take this issue into consideration seriously. Thank you. Dr. Johnny Thank you, Chair. I, in principle, agree that we should adopt the affordable users pay principle. The percentage of the increase is not low, actually. We are going from 4% to 6%. For family offices and top talents, there is an actual impact. Can we actually achieve the $1 billion additional revenue target? I wonder. I think we want to have affordable users pay, but then we should also provide support for those who can't really afford things. We have the property value increase from $3 million to $4 million in terms of threshold for a $100 stamp duty. Can we increase this threshold further to help youngsters and grassroots? Thank you. Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Chair. For the properties that have a value of over $100 million, we believe there's not much of an impact because 99.7% of the property transactions have a property value below $100 million. I also want to say this. For those who are able to purchase property with a value of $100 million or above, they are quite wealthy. They should not have their incentives dampened just because of an increase in tax rate by 1 or 2%. I think with property market, the motivation comes from a stable property market, and from the number of transactions we see, more people are interested in purchasing properties. So we are quite confident this measure will not cause a significant impact on the property market.
As regards lower value properties and whether the concessionary stamp duty rate can be applied to higher value properties. Well, it was adjusted the previous year from 3 million to 4 million as a threshold for the concession. That would help the young home buyers. As for further adjustments, well, we're HERB members, and this will be taken into account in the next budget. Mr. Alan Chen, your statistics that for the whole year, 216 transactions will be affected. But now you know the property market is in a doldrum. So I think there will be more transactions in this category. And there are many new immigrants admitted through the talent schemes waiting to make a decision. Many of them have not acquired their homes. And of course, our policy is to encourage them to settle down. Would the administration consider those new arrivals admitted through talent schemes to be able to acquire residential properties and settle down? I know that the Urban Renewal Authority has said that they have financial problems, and urban redevelopment might be slowed down. I'm concerned that this would lead to a trend of double problems, and that is to say, urban renewal would be affected, and then if we impose a higher stamp duty rate, private property developers may be less interested in redevelopment. We are told that we have more than 10,000 building blocks aged between 30 to over 50. Since we are supposed to ask private individuals who are able to pay more to do so. We're not trying to affect the pace of redevelopment. Would you take this into account in the policy consideration? As for those talent scheme entrants, yes, we want them to settle down, but we have to be fair to everyone. Even if we are talking about a foreign corporations coming to Hong Kong, if they can afford to pay 100 million for residential property, well, I don't think the difference is a lot to them compared with the previous demand side management measures when people who are not first-time home buyers would have to pay 30%. That's a big difference. I think in terms of stamp duty rate, Hong Kong is very competitive in attracting foreign buyers. I understand Mr. Chen's concern about the impact on redevelopment. So we'll follow up this issue earnestly. Maybe I can give you some statistics for reference for the past 3 financial years. So the so-called series of transactions with a value of over $100 million, and we have fewer than 20 for each of those 3 years. So the impact will be rather limited. Most of the transactions in this category were valued under $100 million. So even if the stamp duty rate is increased, like the bill suggests, the impact will be rather minor. But we'll look into how better we can deal with this issue. I declare my interest. My company is involved in urban renewal and redevelopment. A reader has sent us a letter to us and to the government raising some concerns. We want to admit more talents to come to Hong Kong, to settle in Hong Kong, although the permanent secretary that there's no overall impact. But I would say this is a question of the message we send. Is it necessary to raise the stamp duty rate while we want to invite or attract more to come? It's said that for the past 3 financial years, there were only 20 such transactions. But it's because of the special stamp duties imposed. That's why the pace of redevelopment was affected. You cannot just now turn around and say that the impact will be limited. Can we do something to the practice note of the ILD? We have PN1 on the practice to administratively deal with the problem we have identified, and the commencement day will be the 26th of February, having taken into account the geopolitical situation and other factors. Can you defer the commencement date to the 1st of July? Because to buyers who didn't expect this, it's a negative message. So I hope the ILD and the PS can consider these comments. Ms. Lai first, and then ILD Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner. Thank you, Chairman. First, we want to admit more talent, professionals to Hong Kong. And secondly, the government would like to secure the maximum possible resources to serve the needs of Hong Kong. The FS has introduced other measures such as the salary tax allowance. Let me give you an example. In this current budget, the allowance for dependent parents will go up from 50,000 to 55,000. This alone would reduce revenue by $97 million. So we have to find ways to increase revenue through other channels. So apart from the usual channels such as salary tax, stamp duty, profits tax, and given that we have an Asian community, we have to develop the Northern Metropolis, and there's an increasing need for public service and infrastructure. So we have to find different ways to increase revenue without bring about significant impact. People have commented that the line is going to be drawn at $100 million, which is a rather high threshold. That's the result of considering different factors. On redevelopment, I understand Mr. Wong's concern. I don't want to repeat my past answers, but I agree with Mr. Wong in that if we can, through legislative amendments, without going through this council, and do something administratively to bring about the changes, well, then we will certainly go for administrative guidelines. But then, if administrative guidelines cannot give us the solid legal foundation that we need, we'll need to introduce a bill. As regards commencement date, initially, we think that the commencement date should, in our view, should not be changed. Of course, we don't know. There would be a war in the Middle East 3 days after the announcement of the budget. But notwithstanding, the stock market is operating normally, and the activities in the primary property market remains active. So we think that things are sort of all right, notwithstanding the war in the Middle East. We would like to give some certainty in this regard to property buyers. ILD, anything to add from the point on PN1? Well, the PN1 issue by the ILD may not have the legal force needed. So without the legislative amendments, we cannot just amend the PN to bring about the same effect. As the Permanent Secretary said, we would find a suitable means to respond to the concern expressed by the industry. Mr. Wong, maybe you should wait for the next round. Mr. Andrew Fang. I would like to thank the Permanent Secretary for a very detailed response. I have a few questions. This will apply to instruments signed after the 26th of February 2026. Are you referring to SMP or provisional SMP? If I sign a provisional agreement on the 26th of February and followed by a SMP on the 28th, there will be no time to respond for the buyers. Say if we have a small house building, 3 stories, and you know the Chinese people are rather traditional in family reunion. Or no, yes, or $100 million is a high threshold. Even 3 stories of small house may not have a value of $100 million. But since there's a war, there might be one day that our currency will depreciate to such an extent that 3 stories of a small house would be valued at over $100 million. We have been saying that the government encourage people in the same family to stay together and to take care of each other. Can we examine these buyers? You can well imagine that for 3 generations in the same family, they may want to buy 3 stories so as to live together. You know that in some families, family members keep their finances independent. I do understand the policy intent mentioned by the PS that you want to ask those who can to pay more, but as an accountant, I'm confident that the government can try to collect more revenues through the different laws and means. If there's no exemption, that may be a problem, say 10 years down the road. Should you include some exemptions here?
啱冇問題。
Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Fan, for your 3 questions. On commencement date, the approach is consistent with what we have before in changing the stamp duty rate. We'll make use of the date of the signing of the agreement for sale, the temporary agreement for sale. And if we say that we will have this new stamp duty come into effect on 26th of February, and we have a buyer immediately entering into an agreement with an owner, they will still be paying the old stamp duty rate of 4.25%. But if they sign the agreement on or after 26th of February, they will be charged with the new stamp duty rate. We believe this is a fair and open approach. Now, Mr. Fan attaches great importance to the traditional Chinese value of filial piety, and we support this. But in actual operation, the stamp duty system does not punish those who have a large family purchasing a village house of multiple stories to live together. I'm sure Mr. Andrew Fan also understands. For the Inland Revenue Department to find out about the motivation for purchasing a property can be quite difficult. They can't really say why one is purchasing a 4-story high village house. Whether it's for their family, will their family stay with them? It's very hard for the Inland Revenue Department to have an in-depth follow-up. If we want to have a simple, easy-to-understand tax system, this is the approach that we are taking. And I'm sure you understand this is how things are going to work. As Mr. Fan said, if we need to have exemptions, we will make clear of that in law. Let me give you an example from before. When we had high tax rates or high stamp duty rates for transactions that will not be charged with a higher stamp duty rate, that would include assignment between close relatives. The traditional lower tax rate will be charged. We have definitions for what is meant by close relatives, and there are interpretations in the stamp duty ordinance. Thank you. Ms. Nixie Lam. Thank you, Chair. I want to echo on the point made by members about the affordable users pay principle. I have some concerns. Have we conducted overall assessments of the impact with the increased stamp duty for luxurious properties? Of course, we want additional revenue for the government, but then we also want to have a vibrant market where there are a lot of investors. We really need to take a macro perspective. Does the administration have preliminary figures on what the impact is going to be? I also want to talk about family offices. We have been competing with Singapore. We want to attract more family offices to make investments in Hong Kong. And they have quite a high amount of investments. We now have war in the Middle East, and we are thinking about competing for such funds? Does the administration have any estimations on the impact on family offices? Thank you. Mr. Andrew Lai. Thank you, Mr. Xilan, for your 3 questions. About the impact of the increase in stamp duty, it is hard for us to say whether the market has been impacted because it has only been a month or so. But like I said, for this financial year, for the first 10 months, we have only 180 residential property transactions that have a property value of over $100 million. So I can make clear to you, we have been tracking the situation after the announcement. We continue to see residential property transactions of properties with a value of more than $100 million. As for the specific impact, I believe it will take longer to gauge, to be fair. Well, we have set the increase to be from 4.25% to 6.5%. We have already conducted an overall assessment, and we believe it will result in a general increase in government revenue. So that is our assessment on the impact. On family offices, we do want to attract more family offices to Hong Kong. But we believe with purchases of properties, the considerations are mainly the need to purchase properties and whether there are good market prospects. We believe a stamp duty rate adjustment of 2% should not impact the decision much, because with changes in the property market, it would have already resulted in a greater change. And if we look at the market in Singapore, they still have some very high tax rates. For Singaporean residents, they have to pay a 60% stamp duty for residential property purchases. So even with our increase, we believe we are still quite competitive. We also have other advantages that will be attractive to talents and family offices. Thank you, Ms. Christine Fong. I would like to thank the Permanent Secretary and the IRD representatives for attending this meeting to brief members on the legislative proposals. I do understand where the administration is coming from with the adoption of the Affordable Users Pay principle, and we need to increase government revenue. But then we also recently removed this 1-for-1 arrangement for vehicles, and we think you are moving a little too hastily. According to an earlier reply given by the Permanent Secretary, when you signed the preliminary agreement, depending on when it is signed, one will be charged either the original rate or the higher rate. Now, for vehicle replacement, this is the very last day, 31st of March. Is it the case that if they signed the agreement today, even without the vehicle actually being assigned, it will still work? I think the government should take a more gradual approach, giving people room to adjust to the implementation of policy. Before the announcement in the budget was made, we have already been advocating for a $100 stamp duty to apply to properties of higher value so that young first-time home buyers, families with newborn babies can benefit in response to an older population, and I have been advocating for the threshold to be increased to $6 million. If you change the threshold, how much of an impact will it be cost to government revenue? As the permanent secretary said, we have better market sentiment recently. Say for Lois Park Phase 13, we have some small value property transactions going through. For one room unit, it would be $5 million or $6 million. So I think that it is a really good time for us to increase the threshold for the $100 stamp duty to be charged. And with the implementation of taxes, can we have regard to the circumstances and adjust stamp duty fees quickly so that with war or emergencies emergencies, we can make adjustments quickly instead of amending the law? Thank you. Permanent Secretary, thank you. Ms. Christine Fong, for your questions. We heard you and Dr. Johnny asked for us to have $100 stamp duty applied to properties of higher value. We will actively consider your suggestion, but we have to strike a balance. We need to see the impact on government revenue, and will there be a significant increase in the number of transactions for properties of such value? When we consider the budget measures next year, perhaps we can have a comprehensive consideration of the different suggestions. As for what Ms. Christine Fong said, whether we can not amend the laws and have other ways of making adjustments, we would say the change in stamp duty rates is a comprehensive and important change that should be amended by law, and we can consult the LegCo for their views. We believe this approach is the safest. As for implementation, we have some members being concerned about the impact on redevelopment projects. With the additional measures, whether we need to amend the laws or can we just implement administrative measures for that, we will see what solution or solutions we can adopt, and then we will consult the Department of Justice on this. If we do not need to amend the laws, we can just amend the administrative guidance of the Inland Revenue Department. That would be great, but if the Department of Justice considers it more prudent to amend the laws, I hope members will understand. Thank you. Thank you, Permanent Secretary, Mr. Wu Yingpeng. Thank you, Chair. In principle, support the legislative proposals to adopt the affordable users pay principle. So the laws have a retrospective effect of commencing on the 26th of February 2026. There may be disputes stemming from transactions during this period. In terms of policy, the government has already announced the budget on 26th of February. But then, because when the time of transaction, the stamp duty rate has not been increased to 6.5%, there may be contractual disputes as a result. So will the administration implement transitional arrangements to minimize the chance of disputes? Permanent Secretary, we actually attach great importance to the certainty of laws, which is why we propose the commencement date to be 26th of February, the day following the budget. announcement. So we believe the measure should already be widely publicized on 25th of February, the day that the budget was announced. And it would be the buyer and seller's consideration to conduct a property transaction on that day. If one conducts a transaction on or after 26th of February, I'm sure people understand the rate to be charged will be 6.5%, but they will be charged 4.25% for now, and the Inland Revenue Department will charge the difference. And let me reassure members that in the past 10 years, when we increased stamp duty before in the past 10 years to implement higher rates of stamp duty, we have similar arrangements. This is not a new arrangement. Thank you.
Mr. Thomas So, thank you, Chairman. First, I will agree with the broad overall policy principle of the bill. According to the Bureau, you would look at individual residential property units, and if it's over $100 million in value, the rate, stamp duty rate will be 6.5%. I have noticed the problem identified by REDA, that is in the case of acquisition for redevelopment. When would the transactions be regarded as a series of transactions in totality? I think the reply is not very clear to me. The Stamp Duty Office has a standing practice that each individual case will be considered individually to see whether there was actually a series of transactions. For such an assessment, do you have clear guidelines on the factors to be taken into account in deciding whether it's a series of transactions, or in some other cases, it's not a series of transactions since certain criteria are not met? After the bill is enacted, interested investors in redevelopment will need to know that for redevelopment acquisition, you have to pay a higher stamp duty because of certain factors if you want to do this, so that people know that they'll have to pay more in stamp duty. And also, this is, in a way, a disincentive to potential investors in carrying out redevelopment projects. The so-called series of transactions, which means that the IRD may regard a number of transactions to be a series of transactions so that a higher rate is imposed. This is already in the stamp duty ordinance as it is. That this arrangement is already there. Let's say before the 25th of February, for some developers who have acquired some units at $4 million each, according to the stamp duty ordinance, he should just pay $100. But if at one go the developer acquired 20 such units, then according to the standing practice, the value will be lumped together, and a 4.25% of stamp duty will be imposed. So for decades already, the ILD has been doing this for developers and for the people purchasing old property units, they understand this very well. At this time, the rate will raise from 4.5% to 6.5% for properties valued at $100 million. So it's an additional 2.25% of stamp duty, and the concern is that we should not stifle redevelopment. This comment will be followed up on in due course. For IRD, in line with existing practice, when will a number of transactions be considered a series of transactions? Maybe the developer has signed agreement for sale and purchase with the owners with a condition attached, and that is this agreement will take effect if over 80 or 90% of all the owners agreed to this arrangement. And naturally, the IRD will regard these transactions to be part of a series of transactions. When people purchase old units, the IRD will not know the motive, whether it's for self-occupation, for rental income, or for conversion into the subdivided units. There's no way the IRD can tell what the motive is until the time comes for redevelopment, and the developer would make public the intention, and then the IRD would take action accordingly. So we have experience in dealing with transactions of such nature. Mr. Junius Ho, I want to learn more about the marginal relief arrangement, a special concession for marginal relief. For example, 4.25%, and then moving up 6.5%. Those properties valued at 109.5. The stamp duty is 711,750, and if we use the other tier, 4.25% and 30% of the excess, I have paid higher stamp duty. So to those who are really at the margins, and you have to pay more if the value is a bit lower. Have I made a wrong calculation? Marginal relief should result in lower stamp duty. I know I'm mincing the numbers, but I think rich property owners will still ask you to give an account. I'll ask my colleague from the IRD be explained. Well, the marginal relief arrangement would prevent a situation whereby the property value is $1 above the threshold value, and you have to suddenly pay 4.25% instead of $100. So for those who have properties valued over $100 million, then the tax stamp duty rates would be higher than in each progressive bands. There are some examples. For example, paragraph 4, $100 million in value, 4.25%. So $4.25 million. Then next example, $105 million. With the marginal relief, the owner will pay 5.75. So it's 5.4%. And all the way to $110 million, stamp duty payable 7.15%. So the tax rate, stamp duty rate is 6.5%. That's basically the arrangement. Ms. Chan, the marginal relief arrangement would mean that property valued at $109.574 million. The stamp duty payable. It would be the same. $7,122,341. So I have make a wrong calculation, right? Can you provide me with the details of your calculation after the meeting? Okay. Are there members who would like to speak for the first round? If not, then Mr. Augustine Wong will be speaking for second round. I understand the administration's concern that there may not be solid legal foundation if only PN1 was amended. Well, why don't you amend PN1 first? And if it's found wanting, then you go for legislative amendments. Now you think that PN1 is not good enough if there's just an amendment. So why don't you just amend PN1 first? And also if the property is a mixed property, that is to say a residential commercial building, and the value is over $100 million, how would this case be handled? Let's first of all talk about the legislative amendments, and then the ILD colleague will respond to the comment on specific cases. I hope developers and the parties interested in looking at the proposed changes, if amending PN1 would be sufficient, certainly we would go for it, but we are of the view that we need to have legislative amendments. What are we going to do if we have a residential commercial building valued at over $100 million? Well, we'll look at the residential portion and the non-residential portion to see it's a one single transaction or two transactions. If the two cannot be separated, the stamp duty rate for residential building would apply. And that is to say, under the new regime, it would be 6.5% if the value is over $100 million in totality. If the two parts can be segregated, we would deal with the two transactions as two individual transactions. So we look at the transaction, the nature of the transaction, whether it's a single transaction or it's two separate transactions. The problem is that you have some shops and some residential units. Of course, you can purchase them differently in two different transactions. But if there's one transaction for both the residential unit and the shops, and the value is $110 million. Well, if the building can be segregated in in terms of shops and residential units. And if we need to do the evaluation of the two different types of properties, we can certainly consult the rating evaluation department.
第二輪
All right, are there other members who would like to ask questions for the second round? None? That's it for our discussion on policy matters. Let me give a summary. We have at least 5 members who are concerned about whether there will be an impact on the incentives of developers and investors in redevelopment. And the administration has given a reply. They said they will work with the Development Bureau and Department of Justice, I believe, to review this, to see how they can resolve this. Perhaps they can just implement administrative measures. Otherwise, they may need to amend the law still. I hope that you can give a report to members in due course about how you are following up on the situation. What do members think? No questions? Let's move on to the second part, clause by clause examination. Members, please note that the legal advisor issued a letter to the administration on 26th of March outlining some questions. The administration has provided a written reply in English, and it has been forwarded to members yesterday. In clause by clause examination, if members have any comments or are unclear about certain aspects of the clause, please press the request to speak button. We'll go through the Chinese version first. I will now ask the administration to lead the clause by clause examination. Let's first look at the long title and clauses 1 and 2. Who is going to lead the clause by clause examination? Yes, Deputy Secretary or Deputy Commissioner. Yes. All right, I understand members are referring to TsyB brackets 2301 2026. And the long title is a bill to amend the stamp duty ordinance to give effect to a proposal in the budget introduced by the government for the 2026-27 financial year to increase the ad valorem stamp duty chargeable on a conveyance on sale or an agreement for sale of residential property if the amount or value of the consideration exceeds $100 million, to add a new Scale 3 to Head 1.1 and 1A in the first schedule to the ordinance so that the existing Scale 1 and Scale 2 apply to residential property and the new Scale 3 applies to non-residential property, and to make related amendments. Clause 1 of the bill is the short title and commencement. This ordinance may be cited as the Stamp Duty Amendment Ordinance 2026 if passed, and the ordinance is deemed to have come into operation on 26th of February 2026. Clause 2 says the Stamp Duty Ordinance is amended as set out in sections 3 to 14, that is clauses 3 to 14. I will go through the clauses one by one. But let me first give an overview. Members will find that the first few clauses are consequential amendments that are relatively simple. In the original legislation, we did not distinguish between residential and non-residential properties, so these consequential amendments are for this purpose. Please pause here. Let me remind members that after looking at the long title and clauses 1 and 2, we will be referring to the marked up copies, TsyB brackets 1 295/2026 brackets 01. The Deputy Commissioner will lead the clause-by-clause examination, making use of the marked-up copies. Sure, no worries. Thank you. For Clause 3, it is about amendments made to Section 29AI. The amendment is in paragraph B. As said, we are trying to distinguish between residential and non-residential properties interests, which is why in B we have for non-residential properties scale 2 would apply. Now it's scale 3. All right. Clause 4 amends Section 29AIA. Scale of rates applicable to instruments affecting exchange between residential property and non-residential property. Like the amendments to the last section, we have some change in paragraph B. If the consideration is paid or given by the person to whom the non-residential property is transferred, before we would say scale 2 rates would apply. Now it's scale 3. Clause 5 amends Section 29AK. Certain conveyances on sale of residential property together with car parking space to Hong Kong permanent residents chargeable with ad valorem stamp duty at scale 2 rates. Again, before scale 2 rates would apply, we first have to make changes to say for residential properties we would make use of the scale 2 rates. For the car parking space, scale 3 rates would apply. We have also added subsection 1A. So for the single residential property, scale 2 rates would apply. For the car parking space, scale 3 rates would apply. Clause 6 amends Section 29AM. Conveyances on sale of property for replacing other property disposed of under certain ordinances chargeable with ad valorem stamp duty at scale 2 rates. Excuse me, please pause here. We will first ask Mr. Wu Yingpeng to speak, and then I will invite Ms. Christine Fong to speak. Mr. Wu Yingpeng, according to my understanding, for Clause 5, scale 2 rates would apply to the single residential property. Scale 3 rates would apply to the car parking space. But for cases in which the parking space is in the property, then the ownership is this one and the same. So there is duplication in terms of space. What standards will you adopt in calculation of area? Deputy Commissioner, if the parking space is part of the property, in our understanding, we will not be able to divide them up, then we will count it as part of the residential property. Thank you, Ms. Christine Fong. I want to ask for the residential property and the car parking space. With your amendment, the car parking space is counted as separate. Will a 100 stamp duty fee be charged? Well, scale 3 rates are actually a repeat of scale 2 rates. We have a lower tax rate, essentially. We will not have the new tax rate standards of 6.5%. Thank you. Please proceed, Deputy Commissioner. Clause 6 amends 29 AM. Section 29 AM. The heading is Conveyances on Sale of Property for Replacing Other Property Disposed of Under Certain Ordinances Chargeable with ad valorem stamp duty at scale 2 rates. Basically, we specify here for residential property replacing another residential property, and we have made clear of this in the heading. And we have, if the collector is satisfied that there is conveyance of sale, we have added specifically this has to be of residential property. And in 1B, we also added the word residential. As for D, it used to say subsection 3 applies to the replacement property, and you can see subsection 3 originally is divided into paragraphs A and B, and we are removing paragraph B. We only want to retain paragraph A, so we actually put that in D instead, 1D, to say the date of disposal of the original property is earlier than the date of acquisition by the transfer of the replacement property, which is essentially what is said in paragraph 3A before. All right, let's move on to clause 7, section 29A, and other conveyances on sale chargeable with ad valorem stamp duty at scale 2 rates. We have also added after sale in the heading of residential property to specify this applies to residential properties. We have also added expressions relating to residential property in 2 other locations in the section. Clause 8 amends section 29BA, scales of rates applicable to agreements for sale chargeable with ad valorem stamp duty. The first amendment here, we had before note 1A, we have amended it to say notes 1A and 1B. We will go through the first schedule later, so I will not go into the details here right now. We have also made an amendment to say scale 3 rates now apply to non-residential properties. All right. Clause 9. Amend section 29BAB, scale of rates applicable to agreements for exchange between residential property and non-residential property. Again, under subsection 2B, for non-residential properties, scale 3 rates will apply instead of scale 2 rates. Clause 10. Amend section 29BC. The heading is certain agreements for sale of residential property together with car parking space to Hong Kong permanent residents chargeable with ad valorem stamp duty at scale 2 rates. Before we say scale 2 rates would apply, now we will say scale 2 and scale 3 rates will apply respectively. As said before, we have for residential property, scale 2 rates will apply. For the car parking space, scale 3 rates will apply. For subsection 1, before we said scale 2 rates would apply, we now say the scale specified in subsection 1A would apply, and basically distinguishing between residential property and car parking space, scale 2 and scale 3 rates will apply respectively. Clause 1 amends section 29BE, agreements for sale of property for replacing other property disposed of under certain ordinances chargeable with ad valorem stamp duty at scale 2 rates. We again specify this to apply to residential property, and in subsection 1 we have added qualifier of residential property, and in 1B we have also added the word residential. For paragraph D, we originally asked users to read subsection 3, and subsection 3 used to have paragraph A and B, and we're removing paragraph B, so we are just retaining paragraph A in subsection 1D. The date of disposal of the original property is earlier than the date of acquisition by the purchaser of the replacement property. Let's move on to Clause 12, it amends Section 29BF, agreements for sale made pursuant to court orders chargeable with ad valorem stamp duty at Scale 2 rates. We have also added the expression of residential property in the heading as well as in the contents.
款呢就係我
So these are the consequential amendments that I talk about. So we introduced these amendments to make a distinction of residential properties and non-residential properties, and Scale 2 and Scale 3 would apply respectively. Now we move on. The next clause 13, Section 79, added, is a transitional provision. The Gazetted Day, and then pre-amended ordinance. Means that the ordinance as enforced immediately before the 26th of February. Oh, sorry. It's a Section 79, but I think I should move back to Section 78. Section 78, Transitional Provision for Stamp Duty Amendment Ordinance. And pre-amended ordinance here means this ordinance as enforced immediately before the 2026. And then additional stamp duty A, B, C, D. We're talking about the difference here. After this ordinance is amended, we look at the stamp duty payable at the actual stamp duty paid before the bill is passed. So there are Scale 1, Scale 2. We have a bracket 1, and bracket and head 1, bracket 1, capital A, and we mentioned this in four different subsections. As for additional stamp duty, we know that in the case of a residential property, vis-a-vis a car parking space, so for residential building it's Scale 2, but for car parking space, Scale 3. As for the amendments introduced here, we look at the total value in deciding which rate would apply. But here you don't mention Scale 3. How is it calculated? If there's no splitting of the two different values of residential vis-a-vis car parking spaces, there are other provisions on the rate applicable for a residential property linked with a car parking space. If the two can be separated, the car parking space will be non-residential and Scale 3 will apply. As for the residential property, Scale 2 will apply. In replying the legal advisor's letter, we have set out an example for illustration. In calculating the differential, you mentioned the existing Scale 2 with the future Scale 2. you need to specify that the car parking spaces will be taken out in calculating the difference. Let's see how this is interpreted. We are going to introduce Scale 3. It's an extension of Scale 2. Scale 2 originally is applied to both residential and non-residential. So for Scale 1 and Scale 2 in the build, they are for residential. So for a car parking space, Scale 2 would apply before the amendments, but now with the amendment, Scale 3 will apply. So for a car parking space, it's not going to pay anything in additional stamp duty. We have other provisions dealing with residential property. The government does not intend to increase stamp duty for car parking spaces. So here the amendments will only concentrate on dealing with residential buildings. But of course, the long title introduced the new Scale 3. Scale 2 and Scale 3 are the same. So the question is whether the stamp duty rate for car parking space will remain the same. The answer is yes. I hope this is clear for all. Next, applicable instrument means an instrument that is executed on or before on or after the 26th of February and before the Gazetted day. And the instrument is chargeable with stamp duty under Scale 1 or Scale 2. And then the next one is the time limit for paying the additional stamp duty. And that is to say, 30 days after the Gazetted of the amended ordinance. And B, if the stamp duty was paid but the additional is not paid within the time limit, then Section 9 would apply. And that is Section 9 of the ordinance is a so-called levy or fine on the late payment. And the fine imposed on late payment will only be based on the unpaid additional stamp duty. That is to say, if before the amendment ordinance is passed, stamp duty under Scale 1 or Scale 2 was paid, and then what would the legal effect if the additional stamp duty was not subsequently paid or the additional levy was not paid? What would happen? Well, we have set out our response in the letter to the legal advisor. If the additional stamp duty is not paid or the additional levy under Section 9 is not paid, then the instrument is considered not properly stamped and will lose legal effect. And you also talk about civil liabilities collectively and individually. So the collector of stamp duty would take action to recover the arrears, the unpaid stamp duty. And when it comes to registration with the Lands Registry, would such a failure to pay the amounts of due affect the registration? So I think the question is what would be the consequences for those who fail to pay up? If the instrument has already been registered, stamped and registered before the amendment ordinance comes into effect, then we can only take legal civil action. Civil proceedings will follow to recover those. So there will be no other punishment. If in the future he wants to sell the property, would that be allowed? Or if the stamp duty is not fully paid up, the instrument is not valid. So that instrument is not regarded as a properly stamped instrument, and that instrument cannot be used in future transactions. Otherwise, he would have violated the stamp duty ordinance. So the original instrument has no validity. The instrument is not regarded as properly stamped. What that is an instrument is just that it's not properly stamped. Mr. Augustine Wong, under such circumstances, the buyer can rescind the contract because of a lack of a proper instrument. Well, this is really about property transactions, so we have no comment. But the action taken to recover the stamp duty, we can actually press charges, or we can register a charge, so the transaction can be cancelled, right? Mr. Hong Kam Yin, I thank our legal advisor for raising such valid questions. I have some follow-up action. If for a property transaction during which there's proper stamping is not carried out, can it proceed? Can the transaction proceed notwithstanding the failure to properly stamp the instrument? We can register a charge to recover the stamp duty if the parties to a future transaction think it's okay, he can proceed, but it's really about property transaction, and I'm not in position to comment. Maybe we can set out our response in writing. Perhaps that would be clearer. I will work out with your legal advisor. Well, of course, the solicitor will have to ensure that in a property transaction, the stamp duty is fully paid. So that's the first line of protection. Secondly, under the stamp duty ordinance, an instrument that is not properly stamped cannot be adduced in any civil proceedings. And also we'll take enforcement action through legal action. So there are a few lines of protection here, but maybe we can supplement with a written response after the meeting. Thank you for your elaboration. Next, we have Mr. Alan Chen.
都擔任咗
Thank you, Chair. I have served for 3 years the appeal panel in relation to taxation. I understand that there has to be a comprehensive check whether an assignment, that is, the title, has been transferred. If there is negligence on the part of the solicitor, that is another civil litigation issue. So people should go to their lawyers to make sure stamp duty has been paid. And we have under statutory ordinance, if one does not pay the relevant stamp duty after 2 months, they have to pay a tenfold penalty. So most people will pay stamp duty as soon as possible. But it's also a matter of principle. So the Inland Revenue Department should also make clear whether a title has been transferred. Thank you, Mr. Alan Chen. I believe many members are concerned about this issue, and the Department of Justice and Inland Revenue Department representatives can perhaps provide a written reply for the consideration of members that is to be passed on by the Secretariat. Since many members are concerned about this, let me give you some information. We are increasing the stamp duty for properties with a value of over $100 million. We will only charge parties the existing rate, and after passage of the bill, we will have the Inland Revenue Department charge the difference. I believe the transactions will go through within the 1 or 2 months. And when the Inland Revenue Department seeks to charge the difference to parties, they will initiate proceedings if necessary. The transactions with duty, with the agreement being stamped, will still be seen as valid. It's just a matter of the Inland Revenue Department charging the difference, and they have to initiate civil proceedings if the stamp duty is not paid, and there can be a charge on the property. So potential buyers will be able to see in the Lands Register that there are some disputes of the property with the Inland Revenue Department. And like Mr. Alan Chen said, we have a difference of only 2.25%. If we have to impose an encumbrance or charge a difference, we are quite confident that there is sufficient protection for the buyer already with our current arrangements. Before, when we impose relatively high stamp duty rates, this is the approach we took. Perhaps in future we can provide a written reply. I think your oral reply is clear, but because the members' questions are very specific, you should provide a written reply in response to the questions. Thank you. Please proceed. I would like to now go on to say for Section 79, Paragraph 3, the pre-amended ordinance continues to apply to A, an instrument that was executed before 26th of February 2026. B, an agreement for sale that supersedes another agreement for sale made between the same parties and on the same terms before that date. Or C, a conveyance on sale that is executed in conformity with an agreement for sale made before that day, as if Section 14 of the amendment ordinance had not been enacted. Alright, let's move on to clause 14. It's the last clause. It's to amend the first schedule. We have a minor amendment on the first page in the heading to say instead of N73, it's 73 and 79. And for head 1, scale 1, part 1, we have made some amendment. Please refer to page 25 of the marked up copy. In paragraph K, we have our amendments. We have now said where the amount or value of the consideration exceeds $21 million but does not exceed $100 million, 4.25% will apply, and for the consideration exceeding $100 million but does not exceed $109,574,470, it would be 4.25 million plus 30%. In any other case, it would be 6.5%. Let's move on to page 29, which is the scale 2 rates. We are again making amendments to paragraphs K and M. The amendments are the same as those for scale 1, so I will not read them out again. On page 30, we have added some scale 3 rates. As said before, scale 3 is basically a repeat of scale 2 and scale 1 rates. So we have below $4 million, $100 stamp duty will be charged, and it goes all the way up to paragraph K. You can see for paragraph K, we will charge 4.25%. So scale 3 is exactly scale 1 and scale 2 before. We have also some consequential amendments to be made to the notes. First, for note 1B, before, as we did not distinguish between residential and non-residential properties, we will say scale 2 rates apply to residential properties and scale 3 rates apply to non-residential properties. And moving on to page 35, note 1C, we have again made a distinction between residential and non-residential properties. It's the same for note 1. We are again distinguishing between residential and non-residential properties, and scale 2 and scale 3 rates will apply respectively. Moving on to head 11A. Before we were talking about the conveyance on sale, we are now talking about arrangements applying to agreement for sale, but the changes are the same. So for page 41, we have the amendments to scale 1 rates. Again, we have paragraphs K to M's changes the same as what we have for head 1. Basically, for paragraph K, we have 4.25% applying to those with consideration exceeding 21,739,120 but does not exceed $100 million. And we have paragraphs L and M the same as before. Starting from page 42, we have the Scale 2 rates. The amendments are found in page 46. We again have made changes to paragraphs K, L, and M. We have for paragraph K, 4.25% stamp duty rate will apply. For paragraph L, it's 4.25 million plus 30% of the amount will apply, and paragraph M, any other case, it would be 6.5%. We have added Scale 3 rates after this, and as I said, Scale 3 are the same as the rates for Scale 1 and Scale 2 before. I therefore will not repeat the contents of Scale 3 rates. We have also made amendments to the notes in Head 1A, basically making the distinction between residential and non-residential properties and saying Scale 2 and Scale 3 rates will apply respectively. All right. That concludes the scrutiny of the clauses. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Leung, the Deputy Commissioner. We have scrutinized the Chinese version. Let me ask members now, as well as the legal advisor, any questions on the English version? Chair, we have not found any irregularities with the English version. I believe members have no comments either. Thank you. We have completed the clause-by-clause examination of the bill. Thank you, members and representatives from the administration. Now, I will ask if members and the administration will propose amendments to the bill. I think the Permanent Secretary has made clear that they will try to find alternative solutions for some of the issues. If members wish to propose amendments, please email the draft amendments to the Secretary as soon as possible. We have completed the deliberations of the Bills Committee. Today, it seems there is no need to hold a second meeting. The Secretariat will work with the administration after the meeting to see when a report will be made to the House Committee and when we'll resume the second reading debate at the Council meeting. Would members please keep in view of this? The last item is any other business. There is no other business. Meeting adjourned. We can have lunch at lunchtime. Thank you.